If you would join me in prayer. God, we give thanks for these stories, such as this one from Matthew that we know so well, but for also the new ways they speak to us. So I ask now that you might bless the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts and minds, that they would be acceptable to you, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So it was late on Christmas Eve, after many of us had gathered here, that a small group from 6th Avenue, along with about 100 others, gathered in this narrow space between the street and a tall fence surrounding the GEO facility on the Aurora-Denver border. GEO is a privately run detention center where immigrants are held in Denver. Though detention center is the official name, prison is a much more honest word. On the fence, there hung these crepe paper roses, small handwritten notes of love, some of the electric candles that had been passed out for the vigil. There were banners tied to the fence, some reading, "We love immigrants," others saying, "Free them all." It was cold, it was late, and it was Christmas Eve. We sang Christmas carols, familiar melodies, but some of the verses had been rewritten, bent toward the truth of the reality we are living in. We sang Silent Night. And the final verse became this: "Free them all, free them all. God is near, justice calls. Jesus too, a refugee, born to set all spirits free. Liberation is near, liberation is near." Prayers were offered, and the Christmas story was retold, woven together with facts, hard, uncomfortable facts, about what's happening right now to human beings who come to this country seeking safety, dignity, and new life. But the most powerful part of the night came without words, because every few minutes, light would spill through the building's windows, the windows that are made of a very frosted glass, the kind of glass where light passes through, but you can't see clearly. And all of a sudden, a human shape would appear. A head, a hand, an arm, a silhouette, sometimes two hands raised in greeting. Each time it happened, the crowd outside would erupt, cheers, waves, people shouting, "We love you, you matter." And no matter what prayer or song we were in the middle of, everything seemed to pause for a moment just so we could have that connection. It's a very different thing to sing Christmas carols outside of a prison. I kept wondering what it must feel like to be inside, detained, far from home, and hearing Christmas carols float through concrete and steel and frosted glass. Is it comforting? Is it painful? Does it stir hope or grief or longing? I don't know, but I do hope at the very least that it did tell them this: that amid all the dehumanizing ways in which they've been treated, there are still people who see them, remember them, and are demanding something more humane for those in power. There are people who celebrate their courage and fortitude and count them as holy. That image has stayed with me, people waving from behind frosted glass, backlit outlines of human beings. We can't see the room they were in. They could not see us, our faces, our numbers, our banners, but somehow carols connected us in a way that only Christmas carols can. And for those brief moments, there was this shared humanity. I don't know about everyone else that was there, but I know when I left that night, I was different than when I arrived. It's one thing to talk about the cruelty of our immigration system. It's entirely another thing to see human silhouettes waving behind frosted glass. Got home around 11, and I kept thinking about how powerful showing up is. About presence, about taking time out of the busy, comfortable lives to say to others, to someone else, "You matter, you're not forgotten." In many ways, that's really the heart of the Christmas story, isn't it? Of how people showed up. Mary showed up saying yes instead of running from fear. Joseph shows up and choosing faithfulness over self-protection. The shepherds show up traveling through the night. And then there are the Magi. The Magi who were not supposed to be there. They're outsiders. Foreigners with strange accents, unfamiliar prayers. They studied the sky instead of the scriptures. Tenured professors from afar. They trusted questions more than answers. They did not belong to the Holy Family's world, and the Holy Family did not belong to theirs. And yet they came. They showed up. They came because a light broke through their certainty, because something in the heavens refused to stay theoretical, because wonder would not let them stay home. The Magi left comfort for uncertainty. They crossed borders, geographical, cultural, religious, without permission slips or guarantees. They risked being misunderstood. They risked being unwelcome. They followed a star that could not be controlled, but only trusted. And when they arrived in Jerusalem, power was not pleased. Herod was disturbed. Of course he was. Wonder unsettles those who rely on control. Hope is dangerous to those who are invested in the status quo. And notice what happens next. The powerful do not greet the travelers with curiosity. They don't ask what they've seen or what they've carried. They ask how this movement might threaten their grip on power. Fear becomes calculation. Calculation edges toward violence. And the strangers, the immigrants, become a problem to manage rather than people to welcome. This is not ancient history. This is a pattern. The Magi were immigrants. They crossed borders because life and meaning were pulling them forward, and their presence exposed a truth that we still resist. God often shows up in the movement of people, not in the preservation of systems. Today we hear the same rhetoric Herod used, right? Language that turns human beings into risks, into burdens and threats. We tighten borders, we harden hearts, and we call it wisdom. The gospel calls it fear masquerading as order. But still the Magi press on. They don't come to seize power, they actually come to kneel. They don't arrive with weapons, they arrive with gifts, like a shadowy silhouette in the night, to share a common humanity with one another. When they finally reach the child, not in a palace, not surrounded by prestige, but in the fragile, ordinary life of a family just trying to survive, their presence matters. They matter. Yes, the gifts matter, the gold, the frankincense, and myrrh, but even more than that, their witness matters. Their arrival proclaims something the world still needs to hear, that this child is not just for insiders, not just for citizens, not just for the protected and the powerful. Their presence tells Mary and Joseph, soon to become refugees themselves, that they are not alone. It tells the child the nations are already leaning toward you. It tells the world God's love refuses to stay behind borders. This is the epiphany truth that we cannot sentimentalize. The story of Jesus does not work without migrants. Wise ones who travel, a family who flees violence. A child's life depends on movement and welcome. If we celebrate Epiphany while dehumanizing migrants, immigrants, we're not honoring the story, we're resisting it. And when the Magi leave, they go home by another road. Not just because of a dream, but because encountering holy love always rearranges your map. Once you've knelt before vulnerable truth, you can't return to the old ways of fear and exclusion. Epiphany does not end with the star safely packed away or a sweet image of kneeling kings. Epiphany ends with a question that refuses to leave us alone. Where is the light asking us to go? Because the light of God doesn't hover at a distance. It moves, it travels, it passes and presses against borders and fences and systems built on fear. The gospel always moves us toward those the world tries to hide behind fences and frosted glass. The Magi didn't just see the light, they followed it. And following the light changed their direction, their politics, their safety, their route home. They chose another road because going back the old way would have meant cooperating with the violence. Faith, as it turns out, is not neutral. It always chooses a side, and so does ours. Epiphany asks us whether we'll be content to notice Jesus from a safe distance, or whether we will allow ourselves to be arranged by his presence. It asks us to sing carols. It asks us whether we'll sing carols inside warm sanctuaries while ignoring the songs echoing against the prison walls, or whether we'll step into the cold and show up and let ourselves be seen. The gospel always moves us toward the ones the world is trying to hide behind fences and frosted glass. We cannot claim this part of our story, foreign magi and refugee Christ, while supporting policies that cage refugees. We can't celebrate a God who crossed every boundary to be with us while refusing to cross the street or the fence or the political line to be with them. Epiphany stretches us, strips away our excuses, and leaves us with a choice. Will we fear or will we love? Will we distance or will we be present? Will we control or will we be courageous? And here's the good news. We don't have to save the world. We're only asked to show up, to wave back, to sing anyway, to refuse invisibility, to walk another road where the old one leads to harm, to trust that God's light is already ahead of us, waiting in places that we've been taught to avoid. Because the miracle of Epiphany is not just that God was revealed to the world long ago, but that God is still being revealed because God shows up for you and for me and for each of us again and again and again, especially in human lives, especially beyond frosted glass, always calling us to become closer and closer. Amen.